first, let me say, this work is not a substitute for grieving. This does not, grief is grief, right? Regardless, you're going to grieve. The physical presence of your loved one is gone. Their essence, their personality, their spirit, which is everything that you've known about them other than the bag of bones, is still present. But the physical separation is not there. So regardless, something has been lost. I need to tell you that, you all know that. But that needs to be grieved. You need to grieve that regardless. So communicating with your loved ones is all very well, but there's still an element of loss there. So this is not going to eliminate the grief. I would encourage you to allow yourself to grieve, because the grief is a weight, right? It's heavy. And and this has not got nothing to do with communication, but you just don't want to be carrying that weight around with you all of the time, and your loved ones don't want you carrying that weight around with you all the time. So just a couple of briefly words about grief is, first of all, I see all the time people saying, oh, get over it. Those of you who have lost spouses, you've probably heard lots of people say, oh, you'll find somebody new, right? And many of you have heard that, who've lost spouses. Yeah. Oh, don't worry about it. You're young, you'll find someone else, right? And you're going, I don't particularly want, not particular interest in finding somebody else, or, it's just, it's different. But people don't understand that these heart connections remain, this bond and the blending of spirit, the spirit still remains. And that not everybody whose husband or wife has passed the spirit world is really running out down to, Halston to buy a new wedding dress. Do you know what I mean? Or so we want to just, first of all, acknowledge that a lot of the time people just don't know what to say. So I would encourage you, if you're grieving still, well, you're always grieving. The thing about grief is that we don't get over it. We just learn to live differently with our new circumstances, right? That's all that we do, right? And it can be very enriching. And I actually find that sometimes the people who have been most wounded are those who are most compassionate and most empathetic. So in a way, even though the loss of your loved one has knocked you out of your socks, and in many times, often losing the will to live yourself, there can actually be, especially when you understand that your loved one is still present with you, is still loves you, still wants you to be happy, there can actually be a great amount of empathy and help and service that you can be to other people by virtue of your loss. I find that the people who have been most hurt in life, sometimes, if you allow yourself grieve that hurt, can really offer the greatest amount of service and connection for other people who are suffering as well, So there are these sort of odd gifts that we can find in those darkest moments. That pain can actually become something that can be very, very helpful to other people, which in itself brings a whole new world of reward with it, right? But if you are grieving and if you're struggling, and by all means, anybody who needs that help, please go and get that help from a grief counselor or from a support group or something, because mediumship or afterlife communication, while it does make a huge difference to our lives, is not going to make the grief go away, right? Because the physical presence is still there. All of the if onlys and what ifs and it could have been or should have been, those are there, right? That said, we don't know what could have been or should have been, and probably what happened is what could have been or should have been. Like, we really don't know what the soul's path is. We don't know what our own soul's path is necessarily. We don't know what we chose. We don't know what your loved ones chose. We don't know. We can't see from our little vantage point of the worms. We've got the worm's eye view on life in our skin and bones, right? But sometimes it's not until we get back to the spirit world that all of these pieces can fall into place and they begin to make sense to us. Meanwhile, we've just got to muddle along, right? I would say that probably the most awakened and the most enlightened people are those who find a way to be of service and help to other people. And that, in a way, especially when we are in pain, can bring some really profound sense of purpose and meaning to our lives. So I'm not saying run out and start trying to help old ladies across the road or anything like that, but I'm saying that as you go, you will start finding that impulse to, that compassion naturally starts to arise within, which is a beautiful thing. God knows we could do with a lot more of it in the world, right? But certainly it can arise out of this sort of grief. So there are lots of really beautiful things that you can do and you can contribute to the world while you're here, which really will bring meaning to your life. And I am of a firm belief that when you get to the spirit world, those are the things you'll be very thankful for, having had that ability to be able to make a difference in the lives of other people. So don't discount that. And if you will find in the smallest ways, even sometimes, that you'll naturally, your compassion naturally lends to that, and your awareness naturally lends to it. You become more aware of the world around you. So you can, when you're always looking for signs, you're always more aware of the world out there, right? By definition, because you're out there looking for stuff. So you'll see. So just be mindful of that as you go over through the next 4 weeks, as you move through the world. Just remember that everybody in some way, shape, or form is in some sort of pain. And everybody needs a little bit of kindness and a little bit of compassion. And where you see an opportunity to be compassionate or to be kind, take the opportunity and notice how it makes you feel. It will actually uplift you, even in the smallest ways. That little upliftment, and those little upliftments help you also with your communication with your loved one. Right? So don't think for a minute I'm saying go out and do 10 nice things for the people in the day that'll help my communication with my loved one. We're not doing it. We're doing it for its own sake, right? We're doing it for it authentically, all right? The tiniest things they can be, tiniest things, but they will make you be surprised. When you are moving through the world with greater awareness, as you do, the more you do this work, the more you move through the world with this greater awareness, the more you will find those moments. And before you know it, you're actually living in a state of kindness and compassion. And who would have thought from where you are or where you've been that you could ever move through the world with compassion and kindness again, right? Because half the time you just don't want to move through the world at all anymore, right? But do bear that in mind, that actually you're probably saying, why is she talking about? We're supposed to be learning to communicate. This is actually will help you. This will help you because it will help you feel more uplifted, more positive, and feel like you've got more meaning as you move through the world with all of these little tiny breadcrumbs of kindness that you toss around just for the sake of being a good person. And ultimately, the vibration, I don't use those words, they're very new agey, I don't tend to use them, but that vibration that you are on, that upliftment will make a difference to you being able to reach your loved ones, right? Now, one caveat I want to say is if you're struggling to reach your loved ones, don't go, I must not be kind enough, or I must not be compassionate enough, I can't hear them. That's not the case, right? There's a gradual process. This does not happen overnight. This is why, for starters, this course is 4 weeks long, because I want you to do practices each week during the week. A key part of being able to move into an altered state to communicate with your loved ones is that practice sitting in the power that we gave you the recording for. So that's a key part of this. So I highly recommend you try to find 12-15 minutes a day to sit in that practice. If you've got more time, pause it, sit for half an hour if you can. All right. That is but I will say it's a very sensitizing practice. Very sensitizing. When you become more sensitive to the spirit world, what happens? Become more sensitive to the physical world, right? So somebody could say something to you, and you just find yourself bursting out crying all of a sudden for no particular reason, just because you're becoming more sensitive. So just be aware of that it does sensitize you as you go. The signs can often be stronger at the start for a couple of reasons. One is the sort of very spiritual sort of version of that is because the spirit is we're very dense, right? We are very dense in our bones, and the spirit world is much more subtle. And when we die first, we retain some of that density that over time becomes more and more subtle. And so that initially it's very easy for our loved ones to be manipulating and moving stuff because their energy is denser because they're just more recently out of the bag of bones. But over time, they will become lighter and more subtle, and that energy becomes more subtle. So that's one reason. Now they've gone anywhere. It's just the density of the energy has changed a little bit. The other reason that can happen is that initially, and this happened to me, is that they sort of need to do all these magnificent displays of paranormal activity to try to get your attention, right? And once they've got your attention and you go, oh, that's what that is, then there's no need for them to keep doing that because it takes an enormous amount of energy, you know. So what we can do and what I'm going to hopefully be able to lead you through in this class is how you can adjust your energetic state even while in your physical body to sort of elevate that into a more subtle state so you can kind of meet them halfway. So of them having to come plonk down, start turning the lights on, you can meet them up here and you can get a sense of them, right? There will come a point you'll have to, at some point, you're going to have to just decide to suspend disbelief. You're just going to have to be open to it, because for as long as you're going, nah, nobody's ever going to convince a skeptic. It's going to be a gradual process of getting to a point where intuitively you understand that's my son or daughter, partner, whoever, friend, all right? So I'm going to ask you for the moment to set that intention for the next 4 weeks, that whatever you ask for, you're going to be open to receive it. Not ask for something and then be sort of like, nah, I don't know if that's it, you know? Okay? So just take that step. I'm not saying that you have to absolutely emphatically believe, but you have to be open to the fact that this is my loved one, right? Just to be open to it. And then after the 10th, 20th, 50th time, the penny will actually drop. Do you know what I mean? But it's not there's no point in rejecting everything all the time and expecting someday a bolt of lightning is going to come from the sky and spell their name out in flames on your path. That's not going to happen, right? It's not going to come as one bolt of lightning from the sky. It's going to come from you being open to believing this, and then the next, and then the next, and then, oh, it's almost like creating a body of work. And then over time, you'd be like, yeah, now I see. All right. So I would say to you, for those of you who mentioned doubt and belief, that's the best way to start dealing with that. You just have to choose to start. Anyone? So just if you ask for something, just be open to the possibility, all right? And whatever comes your way, just take it. That could be it. And say thank you. Whether you completely believe it or not, gradually over time with that shift will start. So you have to turn a corner on this stuff, right? You're not just going to get a wallop in the head. You're going to have to turn a corner on it. And you can only turn a corner by taking steps one after the other, right? Or being willing to be led, whatever way you want to look at it. The loved one is still the same person they were when they were here. Gradually, people change over time, the same way as gradually people here change over time, right? But initially, it's going to be the same person, Lance, there that was here. And then over time, there'll be these small changes, hopefully, in them. And it's really how fast they change and how fast they grow and heal and all of that depends on them. Some people, you know, my mother, within a year of passing, Jesus, she was amazing. But then I've had other people come. I had somebody come, the father one time, took 22 years to even be able to acknowledge what he did wrong. 22 years. Everyone in their own time. You know, we don't get there, sprout wings and get handed a harp in the cloud, right? We continue to graft and we continue to grow. And all the only difference is we don't have the bones, bag of bones, right? Has anyone heard that? Somebody's lost, they died and they got lost on the way to heaven. I mean, how can you get lost on the way to heaven? Well, we understand we are one unending wave of consciousness that we are all part of. That's how psychics can work. That's how healing can work. That's how all of this works, because we are all fundamentally connected. Animals are fantastic. For those of you with animals in the spirit world, animals are fantastic at this because they don't have this nonsense that we have. They're very much in the present, right? No, first of all, one thing I absolutely emphatically know, or at least in the thousands of people that I've communicated with and the hundreds of people I've sat with who are dying, nobody dies alone. Nobody dies alone. There was always a gathering, always a gathering. And the loved ones usually can see that gathering. And some of you have sat with people who are sick and dying, and you'll start to see, they start to look up in the corners and gaps in the rooms, right? They're seeing the gathering from the other side, right, coming. And I often say, how can, if your granny, your mother, your uncle, you're the postman, everybody showed up at the bedside to collect you at the moment of your death and take you off, how did you get lost? Or do they forget about you? They came the whole way to get you, and then they went and went, oh, like they left the baby on the bus. Like, seriously. Nobody dies alone, nobody gets lost. How can you get lost? I had somebody one time, the son died by suicide, and some medium told them, the mother, that he was lost because he couldn't get into heaven because of the suicide. Why on earth would you say something like that? Even if you believed it, clearly you did, why would you even say something that stupid? And in all honesty, this is why, I believe all mediums should really go through 4 years of training, so that they're not carrying around these ridiculous beliefs and then passing them on to vulnerable people. But they do, it happens all the time, So absolute nonsense, all of it. I've communicated with lots of people who've died by suicide, and I can assure you that they are always there, enveloped with their loved ones, enveloped with the healing guides, enveloped with the healers who are there to help them heal. Let me just put it to you this way. If you had somebody who was running around on their feet, right, and their son has just died and they're grieving, what would your response be? How would you behave in that such a scenario? Do you know what I mean? If you're like a friend of yours, for example, or somebody else comes to you and they're grieving, how would you respond? You try to comfort them, right? You would try to help them. You would try to comfort them. You would try to make them feel a little bit better in whatever way you could, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't suddenly start taking on and feeling the full weight of their grief in you. You might feel a little sad for them, but you're not going to actually experience their grief. You're just going to feel sad and compassionate and kind and try to be helpful and try to be comforting, right? So what's your son doing, do you think? He's doing the same thing. He loves his mum and he wants to help his mum and he wants to comfort his mother, right? But he's not going to be all of a sudden, falling apart because you're falling apart. He's going to be there saying, my mother's falling apart. Let me go see if I can help her. All this stuff makes sense once you challenge the other stuff that doesn't make sense, right? Because what would your son do if he was here? Wouldn't he come up to you and probably put his arm around you, try to comfort you or something? Isn't that what he would do? So that's what he's still doing. Your grief is not going to, if you're coming apart of the seams, that's not going to make him come apart of the seams. That's going to make him just come and try to give you a hug and offer you some kindness and compassion and love and try to make you feel a little bit better because you're his mother and he loves you. Yeah. You got to remember, your son is fine. You know, he's fine. And we experience the loss, we experience the distance, but they don't really, because they are actually closer to us than they have ever been, because they can actually hear all our thoughts now. They are blended and mind to mind connected with us now. So they're actually closer to us than they were when they were in their bag of bones.
Mm-hmm.
We feel the difference, but they don't feel that in the way we do. Instinct, many people. And they are always, first of all, there's always a gathering with them, like everybody else, as they pass. Do you honestly think that all of that and everything that happens in the non-physical reality, all these connections that we have are bridged by love? The most horrible people have come back to me, horrible fathers have come back to me, contrite, because they get there and that's the world and that's the experience they have, and they're able to see life differently. Do you honestly think that we get to that space and they go, oh no, you go back. You had a horrible time, so we're sending you back for more. Anybody who has died by suicide, in my experience of communicating directly with them, is that they are received by those who love them.
Mm.
And they are healed by being surrounded by those who love them. And that was their story. Some people don't seem to be meant to be on the planet for very long. I have never met somebody who died by suicide who was like, oh no, that was a big mistake, I shouldn't have been there, because they get there and they have this additional knowledge, they have this additional information, and they can see it, because we think it's all very separate. We think, oh, we're here and there, over there, up there, they're somewhere else. What we forget is that they can see there is only the stream, and we are all in it all the time. There is no conceivable way that somebody dies by suicide to put an end to whatever pain they were in, and then gets to the other side and there's some psychopath up there who says, go back and do it again. How does that even make sense for people to even come out with something dumb as that? People die, no matter who it is, they die, no matter how they die, they're all greeted and all gather and they're all taken care of, and everybody continues to heal and grow. And a lot of people go to the spirit world early for whatever reason. That was their story. Your story is just your story. It's the way you write it. And if your story moves from chapter 10 on the planet to chapter 11 in the afterlife, that's the way you wrote your story. That's your business. Nobody else can tell you that's not your story. If you sit with yourself, you begin to get very much more familiar with your own presence, with your own energy, with your own physicality, with what's yours, right? What's you. So that as we do these practices and you get more sensitive, it will be much easier to recognize where the energy of another has stepped into your space with you, because you'll feel that subtle shift. Oh, that feels slightly different, you know. So even if you know, you could be just sort of wake up lying in the bed and just call to somebody to, are you here? Can you hear me? Let me, you know, and you'll actually start to, eventually, after only a few seconds, you'll start to feel a very subtle shift in how it feels to be just sort of lying in the bed as you're waking up, you know, and then you know this person has come in. But to recognize that subtle shift, you have to know what it's like just to be you and your energy. And your energy is going to change, whether you're in a good mood, a bad mood, awake, sleep, tired, full of life, whatever. But the more you get to really sense and become aware, I mean, there's a lot of the work they do in somatic therapy as well. It's just that sense of like being very much aware of your own body and your own energy. It becomes very easy, well, much easier to sense when somebody else has stepped in. So those of you who go, I keep speaking to my son and my daughter, my husband and my mother, whatever, and I'm never aware of your presence. Your mother is going to be, or your loved one is going to be drawing close, but unless you are able to tell the difference in that very subtle shift, you won't recognize that they've drawn. It happens all, they're doing it all the time. all the time. But we need to be able to still the mind, understand and recognize our own energy signature. So the thing is that always, constantly throughout the day, as you turn your mind to your loved ones, they are going to draw close, guaranteed, you know. And what we're trying to do, part of what we're trying to do in this class, is help you with practices that you can continue and you can take away to help you then, you know, become, to recognize the subtle shift, you know. Now, sometimes that will happen where, you know, you just sort of chat. Do any of you just sort of sit there and just chat to your loved one? I do it all the time. Yeah, all the time. Just like my mother in particular, you know, at this point, it's always, especially when I'm trying to cook for people, it's my mother, you know? And because I have all her pots and all her stuff here in this apartment. So, you know, so when my mother, and it becomes more subtle, you see, over time. So initially when somebody passes, that energetic signature is much stronger, much easier to sense, but over time it becomes more subtle. And so to meet it, we need to be able to become more subtle. You may feel just an opening of the heart, or you may just feel calmer, you know, or you might have a physical sensation like, you know, like something touching, like a little feather touching your forehead or something on your hair, or, you know, a little crackle of electricity. Sometimes it's very easy because your eyes are so sensitive. It's very easy for around the eyes to feel that crackle of electricity for the energy of your loved one. Lots and lots of ways that this will happen. It will be different for you all. And it's going to depend largely on your loved one, because your loved one is individual with their own personality, right? That they still have the same personality. So what they do will make sense for them, right? Very clear. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what meditation is. And I know, I'm just going to go back over this. There is a misnomer out there that meditation is emptying your mind of thoughts, right? Which is actually biologically impossible. So the only people I've ever come across who can actually empty their mind of thoughts are, you know, monks, Zen monks, Buddhist monks that I've known who have been practicing for, you know, where after many decades of meditation, they reach what's called a state of samadhi, which is complete. It's like almost, it sounds like a very, very deep trance state where you're absolutely, completely oblivious to anything. It's like being in a very deep state of sleep. That's not something that's what 20, 30, 40 years of meditation, sitting in the Himalayas somewhere or whatnot, or something similar, well, you'll arrive at that point. That's not what meditation is for most people. And that's certainly not what it was even for those monks when they started out. So it's not possible to empty your mind of thoughts. It is not possible to push a thought away, because to push a thought away, you have to have the thought, let me push that thought away. You see? So all you've done is replaced a thought with another thought. What we're not about is letting thoughts go. Just means return your focus to either the breath, to the light, the sensation of whatever it is you've chosen as your single point of focus. So all we're doing is releasing whether or not the tomatoes are fresh down in Tesco's, whatever supermarket, Stop and Shop or whatever, and coming back to, I'm here in this moment on this chair, and I'm just breathing in and breathing out, or I'm sitting within the light, or whatever point of focus works for you, right? You'll sit there, you'll bring your focus back to the breath, you'll probably hold it for about 5 seconds, and your mind will run off down the street again, because that's the nature of the mind. And what we do, we recognize, we run off on a train of thought, and we release it. We just let go of the monkey mind or the little mouse on the wheel. We let it go, and we just come back, and we just bring our focus back to the breath. This is not anything that can be communicated in language, and so there's no possible way to convince anybody that something is a sign, because it's a very individual experience. and is only speaking to you in a way you'll understand. So, you can't, convince. It's like it's like anything in life. You've got somebody who votes for the other guy. You're never going to convince that person that guy is a shyster. You shouldn't be, you'll never, if that's who they believe in, that's who they're going to, or girl or woman or man, whatever, that's who they're going to believe in. We know this, we've seen this all ourselves in the last few years. We've seen it. People get entrenched ideas about all sorts of things. And when somebody has an entrenched idea, there's just no point in trying to convince them otherwise, which is why I used to be a political correspondent, and I never talk about politics anymore because it's a complete waste of time, so the thing is that there really actually isn't. And I would say, these signs are precious and you want to protect them, and you want to protect your relationship with your loved ones. So I'm inclined to, so first of all, I never talk to anybody about these things. To me, coming to somebody who's bereaved, who has said, I've seen a sign, I've seen a heart on the stairs, regardless of that other person's belief in whether it's your imagination or it's true or not, tact and compassion dictates you let it be. Mm-hmm. You don't come to a grieving person who says, oh, I've seen something in the sky, I do believe it's my wife or son or mother or whatever, and somebody go, oh, that's just ridiculous. I mean, that's a person to disengage from, a person at least to set a very firm boundary with, where you don't share anything with them, because that, if nothing else, that's just insensitive to a bereaved person, right? Who would do that? If somebody came to you and said, my child has just died, and I do believe I saw their toy on the floor, and I do believe they put it there. I mean, in all honesty, would you come along and say, that's nonsense? Mm-hmm. You would, if you don't believe it, you would have the tact and the compassion to talk to them as a person who is in pain and suffering. I've nothing else. So engaging with people don't get this. So I would say to that, the best thing to do is this is a relationship between you and your loved one. I mean, generally, when your loved one was running around on their 2 feet, you didn't go up to complete strangers and say, oh, let me tell you about my relationship. Right? So I do it now. I know you get excited, but the excitement is between you and your loved one. So be very careful about who you share with. Very, very discerning in your sharing. And, some people won't get it. I've got a lot of friends of mine I've kind of ended up over the years sort of becoming kind of much more distant from, just grew apart because of this, because they couldn't get their head around it. And the fact that they couldn't get their head around it meant that they thought everything I was doing was delusional. And for me, it's not healthy to be in that environment. And I do have some friends that I still are friends with who don't believe. We just don't talk about it ever. But it just means there's this big gap in the conversation because I do this full time, So this happens, this changes. People will come into your life and other people will drift out of your life. This generally happens when anybody has these kinds of relationships or when anybody has this kind of an awakening. So I would just say be very careful. Be careful of oversharing, or be careful of who you share with. People can undermine your confidence very easily. And a key part of this work that I've been trying to help you through practices with is to build that confidence, to build that sensitivity, to be able to move beyond seeing signs out there in the world. Because the relationship feels it feels stronger, and it's far more intimate when you can actually move your attention inward to feeling their inward presence. That's why we've been doing these practices of the meditation and the power, is to move the practice inward, so that you don't have to always be looking around and then trying to interpret what you saw. And, they don't have to work so hard either, And sometimes you just get this knowing, which nobody can explain except you, because you just knew it.